welcome to everyone to TYT Community here on the TYT Network. The show, of course, paneled by members and fans of the Young Turks. I want to thank everybody here for tuning in to the live stream. Thank you, guys. I am your host, Jeff Waldorf, and with me today is my co-host, Sean Fitzgerald. No big panel today, so we've got a relatively short show, but we have a lot of fantastic stories to get through, a lot of important things, and of course, we're going to take some shots at goofy Republicans, because when do we not, right? But before we get into some of the fun stuff, we're actually going to go into something important involving, of course, Wall Street and how they're going to screw us again. With so many important issues facing the American economy today, like the recent news of a sharp contraction of the economy by almost 3%, the continued lack of unemployment benefits for millions of Americans, the massive growth of low-paying service sector jobs that continue to replace the lost middle-income jobs, and another possible shutdown coming in September, courtesy of Republicans, you'd think that Congress would be rushing to fix all of these. Or not. Pretty much everybody knows by now that Congress is essentially useless. But not only are they being useless, but now they're working to make things worse. How? How could they make things worse? Well, House Republicans have put forward and passed a new Wall Street deregulation bill. Yes, they're deregulating derivatives again. Now, this bill would, of course, weaken the much-hated Dodd-Frank even more. For example, in it there's something called the, quote, London Whale Loophole Act. That would allow American banks to skip Dodd-Frank's trading rules on derivatives if they are traded in countries that have similar regulatory structures. Read that they have also deregulated derivatives in that country, so they can just skip it. Why have regulations when I can just skip it? That's essentially what it is. Now, none of this, of course, should be any surprise because, hey, it's the House, and hey, it's led by Republicans. Republicans love Wall Street. But they're also being helped by a growing number of pro-corporate Democrats. Yes. Surprise, shock, and horror. I'm not really all that surprised. Now, the Huffington Post explains. Many components of the bill approved Tuesday had previously passed the House with bipartisan support. Democratic opposition to this bill was broad, with only 46 Democrats voting in support. That is a marked change from several recent House votes on Wall Street deregulation that have drawn substantial backing from dozens, and in some cases, an overwhelming majority of House Democrats. Now, here on TYT Community, and basically on the so-called liberal media, we love to talk about the divisions within the Republican Party, and we love to focus on those. But we don't talk often enough about the ones in the Democratic Party. Now, a good example of this is the Congressional Black Caucus, which normally votes very progressive, but has recently had some members that have been voting on things that would help out Wall Street. And there's a pro-corporate group, also called the New Democrats, that loves Wall Street and helping out big corporations. Now, these groups have been voting with the Republicans to weaken regulations on banks, and specifically derivatives, because the banks have a lot of power. Remember, Dick Durbin, famous for saying, the banks frankly run the place. And it couldn't be more true. And now more than ever, lobbyists from Goldman Sachs have been working extra hard on buying off more Democrats. So this is the system that we have. Now that money has overtaken our politics, and now that the Republicans have essentially driven themselves off a cliff, Wall Street has decided to throw more weight behind the Democratic Party in order to maintain their stranglehold on our politics. Now, I wonder if the media and Democratic voters will begin holding the Democrats in office more accountable when they start voting more and more against their constituents. Now, Sean, what do you have to say about this?
Well, I mean, this bill passed the House. It hasn't been signed into law. The White House said that they are strongly opposed to it, but we've kind of heard that before. where Obama will say he's opposed to something, but then he'll sign it like with the Authorization Act. This law sounds like it probably could make sense if like you have the same regulatory structure in England, right? And you don't want your banks to have to take the extra steps if they're already doing that for England. So on paper, it sounds like it could make sense, but we all know how these tend to shake out. They tend to advantage bigger banks and bigger financial institutions while shortchanging the little guy. So like I don't know how exactly I feel about this. I mean, it's like because to me the issue it really isn't the amount of regulations; it's the amount of regulations and that are tied to guarantee. Basically, we've guaranteed that these companies can't go out of business. So it's like we can't let them do whatever we want unless we're going to actually let them go out of business, and they know that. So we've sort of incentivized bad behavior, and now there's less rules on companies that are already incentivized to do bad things.
Right, and that's like the most conservative thing that you can say is, hey, if you're going to do business, okay, that doesn't mean that we're going to support you when you fail. When you fail, you should fail. But in this case, you're absolutely right that this is completely not conservative at all. This is pretty much, I mean, this is a good example of socialism, essentially. You're saying that these banks can do what they want. We're going to loosen the regulation on these banks so that when they fail, we will pay for them. And we've already done that once. And now we're basically being set up to do it again. I mean, derivatives are what blew up the economy in 2008, or at least played a significant role in what happened in 2008 and the housing bubble and the crisis that happened afterwards. And we're still trying to recover from that. And these idiots in the House, Republicans and now Democrats that are being bought by these corporations and being paid for by these giant banks that have only gotten larger since they were bailed out by the taxpayer. I mean, what are we doing? It's insanity.
I mean, they basically can operate with impunity. It's like the analogy I would compare this to is if you have like a 20-year-old kid and he goes to Vegas and you tell him that no matter what amount of money he loses, you're going to pay him back as his parents. Then that kid is going to go and play the riskiest, most high-reward games, and if he loses, he doesn't really lose. Like, the problem with our current banking system is that there's no fear of loss on the bank side. So, like, if you have deposit insurance and you don't put people in jail for fraud, and then on top of that you have no rules, it's gonna be a disaster. Like it's insane. Like it doesn't make any sense.
It's been a disaster, and it's going to be a disaster again. And look, I'm actually glad that the White House is at least saying that they're against it, but just like you said, it's so easy, and it's good to be skeptical about this because they could easily throw in something to sweeten the pot for Democrats and say, hey, look, we'll give you, I don't know, we'll give you the Volcker rule or something like that, and Democrats will jump all over it. And the White House will be like, oh, well, I get something that I want.
Right.
Well, the banks get almost everything they want.
And this is like Obama's go-to move. Like, not to get all conspiratorial, but we've literally seen this in the past with the National Defense Authorization Act. He says that he's against it, and he'll veto it. So basically, the liberal opposition is like, well, it's not going to get signed by the president anyway, and then he signs it when nobody's looking, after they make some tiny tweak in the language, and the bill still means the same exact thing. Like, I would be on, if you're against this, I would be on the president to make sure he vetoes this, or get on the Senate, because like the Senate couldn't, it's just past the House. The Senate could still vote it down.
Mm-hmm. And look, that's what the media is supposed to be doing. Like, the media should be all over this, and they're really not. There's nothing on CNN talking about these, this vote and these new proposed rules and the attempts to water down Dodd-Frank even more. There's nothing about that. And really, it's the media's job to be writing the Senate on these rules, to be writing the president, and to be holding people accountable. And we just don't have a media structure that's conducive to that.
Well, I mean, the media caters to the corporations and the people in power.
Yeah. And that's exactly why they're not doing their job. All right. So, speaking of the media, and actually speaking of holding people accountable, we're going to go over to Iraq. We're going to talk a little bit about Iraq here in the next segment. So that should be a lot of fun. So as ISIS continues to rip apart the country of Iraq, spreading death, terror, and mayhem, our own homegrown bringer of despair has also returned to spread his own brand of terror.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney thinks so. He thinks we are in danger because of this lack of leadership or the delay of game in making decisions, and he joins us right now. Mr. Vice President, you got to admit, though, complicated situation when it comes to Iraq now.
Right.
ISIS, bad. Iran, bad. All with different objectives. The Mahdi army, Shia, bad. We're the...
That's right. Everybody is bad. Hold on here. There we go. So, yes, everybody's bad, but where are the good guys? Where are the good guys? Well, certainly not in that room. And yes, you've seen right, Dick Cheney is back, and somehow the media and everyone else has been forced into hearing his bullshit opinion on Iraq. So, let's hear a little bit more of that bullshit opinion, then we can tear it apart.
The good guys.
The Rand Corporation just recently published a study that shows there's been a 58% increase in the number of Al-Qaeda type terrorist groups in the last 4 years. 58%, doubling in the number of terrorists.
So there's a lot more, apparently a lot more terrorists, according to the Rand Corporation. We'll get to that a little bit later, but let's continue with what Dick Cheney has to say.
So the whole problem of terrorism is difficult because of the proliferation of it, and the other problem, of course, is the developing possibility that sooner or later some of them will get their hands on deadlier weapons.
Are you indicating, in fact, that we could be on path, or we are on track for something worse than 9/11?
I think that's a possibility, and I can't say specifically at this point when something like that might happen, but it'd be foolish for us to ignore the extent to which there are people who terror-sponsoring states who have in fact tried to provide nuclear technology.
And your worry is, even though what's going on in Iraq is way over there, that they bring it here because a lot of those people, the terrorists, have American passports. In a couple of months, one of them could be walking in front of our building with some sort of gizmo to wreak havoc.
One could only hope. I'm kidding, of course. I don't actually hope that Fox News gets exploded. But nonetheless, here we have Dick Cheney once again talking about nuclear weapons. Now, where have we heard that before? Oh, right. When he was talking about Iraq originally having weapons of mass destruction and saying that eventually Iraq was going to have a nuclear weapon. So yes, Dick Cheney once again pushing for war and warning about terrorists and nuclear weapons. Either Dick Cheney has forgotten about the mess he caused, or I have somehow gone back in time. Now, he's not the only idiot that got everything wrong about Iraq, and yet is somehow still allowed on TV.
Paul Wolfowitz, what do you do then, as a policy matter now, to stop this?
Look, it's a complicated situation. You don't just come up with, we're going to bomb this or we're going to do that. We have to convince people in that region, Kurds, Iraqis, not Maliki is a big part of the problem. He's not all of Iraq. We need to find people there, and most importantly, I would say, in Syria, where the U.S. policy and absence over the last 3 years has sent a signal of lack of seriousness throughout the region. I would do something in Syria. It's a bad situation. It's now dominated by Assad and by ISIS. We should be finding
But
people
we keep
fighting
coming
both.
back to the idea that somehow military intervention, Dexter, is somehow going to make the situation better. We have a lot of experience of U.S. forces in Iraq failing to produce the kind of outcome that we thought was going to materialize.
Surprising actual question.
I don't know about that. Bringing back Paul Wolfowitz, remember, Paul Wolfowitz was the man that said the Iraq War would pay for itself. Now, I've got a deficit chart that will actually show otherwise. So he says that in order to do something about ISIS, we have to do something about Syria? Wait, what? Syria. Going into Syria. Syria, Esley? I know. Bad pun. But it sounds like another bad idea from a neocon idiot. I don't know. Do you agree, Sean? Do you disagree?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously we're in a very serious situation over there.
Indeed.
And no, of course I don't agree. Dick Cheney in another clip, and not that one that we showed, he actually said that he would send 20,000 soldiers back into Iraq because the American people really, really want to send troops back into Iraq to die for that country. It's a total disaster. What Dick Cheney didn't say, or what they didn't tell, what Dick Cheney didn't say, Mr. 4 times as many Al-Qaeda, or whatever number that he used from a certain period of time, is that there were no Al-Qaeda in Iraq before his war. Like, they did not exist. Saddam Hussein was Sunni, but he was a more secular Sunni, so he actually hated Al-Qaeda. Like, we destroyed the balance in that country. Saddam Hussein wasn't a good guy, but we destroyed the balance in that country, and now, like, the natural 1,300 years of imposing forces are, like, coming to, like, fruition. Like, the Kurds have their own country now. Like, it's not called Kurdistan yet, but it will be. Like, the Kurds have their own country. We should just leave them alone. They don't seem to have a problem with us in general. We shouldn't piss them off. The Sunnis are going to take over the Sunni territory, and the Shiites are going to go with Iran, and they're going to take a lot of the weapons that we gave the Iranian government. A lot of the weapons that, by the way, haven't already fallen into ISIS hands because we left the weapons depots in Sunni territory, and they have it. So it's a disaster, and Dick Cheney should shut up. And if you're on Fox News and Elizabeth Hasselbeck with the weak sauce question of all time, or the most, like, fraudulent question of all time, that if we don't do something over there, is it possible that we could have another 9/11? Like, anytime somebody says we have to do something to prevent another 9/11, except this time it'll be a worser one, they're either in the movie Team America World Police or lying to you.
Excellent. And, by the way, we're not done. We have one more asshat as well to cover.
I mean, it is a disaster. Donna's right. It's a disaster, unfortunately, made possible, or certainly made more likely, by our ridiculous and total withdrawal from Iraq in 2011. President Obama said 2 days before Election Day in 2012, Al-Qaeda's on the path to defeat. The war in Iraq is over. That was enough to get him reelected. But how does it look today? Al-Qaeda's on the path to defeat. The war in Iraq is over. Neither is true, and it's a disaster for our country. Look.
And here we get to the lesson. If you helped break it, you can always blame it on the black guy. And still, the mainstream press will listen to you, just like Bill Kristol, Paul Wolfowitz, and Dick Cheney. Now, as far as my suggestion is that if you are so completely and utterly wrong about a specific topic, stop going on TV to talk about the very thing that you were wrong about. And if you're Dick Cheney, you should just generally shut the fuck up.
Well, I mean, to be fair to us, we obviously don't understand these guys, their third time's a charm doctrine. because it didn't work invading Iraq in the 90s. It didn't work invading Iraq in the 2003. But this time it will totally work if we reinvade. We'll totally unite the three sectarian factions that hate each other and have hated each other for 1,300 years. This time we're just gonna, sprinkle a little American freedom in the form of bombs, and they'll just be like, oh, we'll coexist. They'll all have those bumper stickers. It'll be awesome.
Exactly. That's what they're... Man, it's amazing that we give so much time, so much airtime to people who are absolutely 100% wrong. And it's funny because even though there are actual facts to show them how wrong they are, they will double down. Change like, yeah, we did the absolute right thing going into Iraq. I wouldn't change it for a minute. No, because you got fucking rich off of it.
And by the way, Dick Cheney's administration, the Bush administration, which, by the way, credit to George W. Bush for painting and not talking about this, but the Bush administration signed the Status of Forces Agreement that led us to our withdrawal in 2011, and Barack Obama fought against the withdrawal. Like, he fought tooth and nail, and I say the Iranians, the Iraqi president, Maliki threw us out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so they're even wrong about that. Like, yeah, he's a warmonger just like you. He just couldn't get out of the agreement that you stuck him with.
Right. He wanted to stay longer, but there were specific rules that we wanted, basically, so our troops couldn't get punished under their law. And since, and it's a very sensible thing to pull out if they're not going to agree to those rules. So that's why President Obama pulled the troops out, left Iraq, and then he, spun it to declare victory. And said, look at that, I got us out of Iraq. No, you didn't, actually. Right. You did, but you wanted to stay.
And we're going to have to accept the fact that this is going to change. Iraq and Syria are going to change into 3 countries eventually. Like, we're going to have Kurdistan in the north, we're going to have Iraq, and we're going to have Philadelphia. Because it's always Sunni in Philadelphia. But
You couldn't get more bad of a pun if I had said it. So, hey, props to you, man, for having a pun that even I groan at. Round of applause. That was definitely...
Thank you.
Yeah. Everyone, he'll be here all night. Be sure to check him out.
Exactly.
All right.
And back tomorrow.
And back tomorrow, of course. All right, so go on to our next segment, and it's another Fox. It's a Fox News host that's been getting a lot of attention lately, even so much that Russell Brand has made fun of her, and so now it's our turn. Hey, all right. Looking forward to this. Fox News host Judge Jeanine Pirro recently went on a rant about the situation in Iraq. ISIS, President Obama, ball shaming, it literally had everything. Now, I've got some highlights of that rant, and then I'm going to break down why this woman is absolutely insane and therefore perfect for Fox News primetime. Roll it.
I've told you that you need to be afraid because they are coming for you. The ISIS assault, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria signals the beginning of the reverse crusade. They are coming for us. To them, we are the infidels.
Yes, we are apparently the infidels. Please continue.
But I, for one, am not willing to let one more American die or come home with fewer limbs from that part of the world. Americans have shed enough blood there. My resolution? Airstrikes. Bomb them. Bomb them. Keep bombing them. Bomb them again and again.
Bomb them again and again and again and again, because bombing makes everything better. But wait, she's not done scaring the shit out of you yet.
They told us they were coming for us. The head of this band of savages, Abu al-Baghdadi, was released by the Obama administration and started ISIS 1 year later in 2000.
Wait a minute. I'm going to have to stop her there. Fact check. She's full of shit. According to the Department of Defense, al-Baghdadi was released in 2004. Not only that, but the Bush administration was working on ending the policy of Americans holding large numbers of Iraqis in detention camps. And it was in the process of turning them over to the Iraqi government. So if Baghdadi had still been held by that time, his release would have already been most likely guaranteed by the Iraqi government and not ours. So if he were released, it would be because of the recently mentioned Status of Forces Agreement that was signed in 2008 at the end of the Bush presidency that promised to turn over nearly all Iraqi prisoners to the Iraqi government that would decide what to do with them. Sean, to be fair...
But to be fair to her, if I'm not mistaken, didn't Barack Obama break him out of jail in 2004?
Perhaps.
No, I'm obviously wrong on her facts. I just wanted to point out how ridiculous is this.
It is incredibly ridiculous. Let's have her continue. Please, Janine, continue.
2010. ISIS is a fanatical religious terrorist organization. And if you think they are nothing more than ragtag rebels, you are wrong. The truth? There has been a 60% increase in radical Islamist terrorism since you've been in office. And you just keep letting these guys out. Like the Bergdahl trade and the 5 terrorists, you didn't have the balls to try and Gitmo or federal court. You were simply clueless. A paper tiger who only knows how to cut and run. It's your feckless, weak foreign policy on the world stage.
I just had to stop there. A 60% increase in Islamic terrorism? Holy shit, how come I haven't heard about all that terrorism? 60%? Holy shit. Oh, you know why I haven't heard about it? Yeah, because she's wrong. The study by RAND that she indirectly references showed an increase in terrorist groups, not incidences of terrorism. Now look, that's still bad, okay? So the question is, where are these groups, and where are these groups forming? Well, they're forming in places where there are weak governments, right? Governments that have faced revolution, sometimes aided by, oh, would you look at that? Aided perhaps by us. Now check out this infographic that we have. Okay, so that is a map of basically all the groups, okay, the terrorist attacks in the region, right? And if you can look, a lot of those are happening in places where we have had, or I should say they have had revolutions and now have weak government power. Turns out when you have a revolution, there tends to be a power vacuum, and groups will go to fill that vacuum. So hey, look at that. So that's a good, interesting infographic that I actually love. So let's have her continue.
But wait,
it's your feckless, weak foreign policy on the world stage that is creating a danger zone for all Americans. You and Hillary armed and trained terrorists and gave them true battlefield experience. And then you did a cut and run in Libya and Iraq, leaving our weapons behind. The irony, Mr. President, it will be with our taxpayer-funded weapons that they will be coming for us.
The weapons, by the way, are what we gave to the Iraqi government after the Status of Forces Agreement in 2008. Remember, we just mentioned it, Obama wanted to stay longer, but because Iraq wouldn't allow our troops to stay under our terms, we pulled out. I wouldn't quite call that a cut and run. Now, she continues, final clip of her.
So now that your numbers are in the tank, 54% say you're not able to lead. You have a 41% job approval rating, 37% foreign policy approval. You now pick up the ringleader of that Benghazi massacre. Our special forces now arrest Katala. Wow. Mr. President, Americans don't trust you for good reason. We're not convinced you even know who the enemy is. You release terrorists, you cut deals with Iran, you dance around with your political correctness while they sharpen their knives. Mr. President, you are playing a very dangerous game for which you are ill prepared, and it is the American people who will suffer.
Yes, of course, Benghazi. No Fox broadcast is complete without mentioning Benghazi and, of course, having a large amount of classic fear-mongering. Now, let's not forget who else released terrorists. If we're talking about presidents that dealt with terrorists and cut deals with Iran, I think it's important to mention Ronald Reagan. Now, I gotta say, hats off to Judge Jeanine for carrying on the fine tradition of lying, fear-mongering, spreading political bullshit. I'd keep an eye on this host, America. This lady, she's going places.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I don't know if you want me to jump in now, but I'm doing that anyway.
Go ahead.
This woman is it's hard for me to say 100% wrong, because a lot of times throughout our history, which I'm guessing, according to her, started the day Obama took office, we've armed people who would later become our enemies, like arming the Mujahideen, who would later spawn such characters as Osama bin Laden. We armed Saddam Hussein to go after the Iranians in the 80s, and then Desert Storm 1 was when we first regretted that because they were using our weapons against us. Like, this is like the history of interventionism in our country, is we arm people who aren't really our friends, but at the moment we have another enemy that we want them to go after, and then they later turn those weapons on us. So, like, pointing out that the ISIS people have our weapons is a good thing to point out, but pointing out that they have our weapons because of Obama and not because of the Iraq War, which was started under George W. Bush, doesn't make any sense. Like, we spent all this money training basically deserters who didn't really care about Iraq. We armed them over the years for more than since 2008. We've been giving the Iraq.
We spent $2 trillion in Iraq, and a lot of that money went to arming the Iraqi army. And look, the Iraqi army, they're deserters because they don't care about Iraq. Iraq doesn't exist to them. That's not a thing. That's a thing that Britain came up with and that the West agreed with. Like, right. We made Iraq. Iraq's not a real thing. And that's why you said earlier, and it made a whole lot of sense when you said it, that Iraq is going to be partitioned into 3 parts. And maybe it's better that way. Because I don't see any sort of problem, or I don't see any sort of solution to this problem other than keeping them separate and letting them do their own thing. You can't hold that country together, and I wouldn't even try.
And there is, it's not to say that there isn't problems with that. Like, the Kurds want a Kurdistan. Our ally Turkey has a lot of Kurds on that border. So, like, they're going to want those Kurds in their country. But luckily, for the most part, throughout Turkey's history, they've been more generous to minorities than the Iraqi government or the Iranian government or the Syrian government. So, like, maybe that won't happen. But the Kurds are going to merge with parts of Syria. The Sunnis are going to merge with parts of Syria. Like, that's going to happen. I didn't know this until recently. But the Iranian government always thought of Syria as their own Shiite province. So, like, the idea of these countries being like what we say they are just because they're on a globe with those imaginary lines drawn around them is just fiction. Like, these people are going to break up. Like, it would have taken an amazing leader, right? And like, I hate to say that because Saddam Hussein kind of kept Iraq together, but it would have taken an amazing.
It would take either an amazing leader to try and help people get over their sectarian lines, or it takes a brutal dictator to crush you to keep you together. And that's what Saddam Hussein was. He was the brutal dictator that kept everything together because he ruled with an iron fist.
And by the way, this is a lot of this is not only the Bush administration's fault, but it's Maliki's fault. Like we remember, like, years and years ago, obviously Fox News and most of the mainstream media doesn't remember the stories about Maliki clearing out the opposition party, which was the Sunni party. That, like, I think he called the first person, which would be the equivalent of John Boehner, like the leader of the Republicans in the House. Like he called them terrorists and like was targeting those people. So this is the Sunni backlash. Like this is partly that it's partly that we invaded, partly that we installed a corrupt government, partly that the corrupt government is corrupt, but mostly the fact that these people hate each other. Like, and it's a deep-seated hate that goes back 1,000 years, and we're not going to fix it no matter how many billions or trillions we spend, no matter how many Americans go and die. The only thing that's going to change is that Americans are going to die, along with Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds.
And we also can't fix it by following Judge Jeanine's advice and just bombing the shit out of everything. That doesn't work. The only thing that you're going to do, and Russell Brand pointed this out when he did his own rebuttal of this video, and he went and dissected it just the way that we did. He said that, look, every bomb you drop, it's not actually really a bomb. If you look at it metaphorically, I guess, it's a seed. And every time that seed hits the ground, it pops out terrorists. That's essentially what, he put it much more eloquently than I did, of course, but it's essentially every bomb that you drop, you're creating more terror. And that's the whole problem, too, that we have against drone strikes, is that drone strikes in those areas, that also serves to create more terrorists. So if you want to guarantee that ISIS or that any of these Islamic groups over in Iraq are going to attack us, then follow Judge Jeanine, follow Dick Cheney, follow Paul Wolfowitz, follow all of their shitty advice, and bomb an airstrike or put boots on the ground, because you're going to have a guaranteed surge in anti-American sentiment, even more than it is now.
And the amazing thing is that they are not going to attack us in the near future at all. Like, this group, these people in these countries, they are fighting a civil war. Even if we support the policy of a peaceful division into 3 separate nations, like, that peaceful alternative is going to be a bloody massacre. Like, they're not going to be like, you know what we should do? We should go nuke America with planes and nukes that we don't have. Like, it's ridiculous. I remember people were talking about how ISIS had an air force. ISIS had an air force because they took over bases that have the helicopters that we bought the Iraqi army. But there's like this big joke that a lot of people don't realize, is that those helicopters in Iraq and Afghanistan that we're giving away, they don't know how to fly them. They don't know how to fix them. Like, we are like, I'm being serious. Like, the only people in Iraq that probably know how to fly those helicopters are the Shiites who were trained in Iran, or the Sunnis that used to work for Saddam Hussein, who actually aren't radical Muslims. They're, I would say, moderates. They're dictators. Like, they support a dictatorship. They supported Saddam Hussein, but they're not like a religious dictatorship. So, like, the idea that they're going to fly these Russian helicopters out of Iraq into New Jersey or Michigan or California, like, it's ridiculous. This is a regional problem that could escalate in that region and be a disaster for that region, but it's not like the terrorists. It's not really a terrorist situation. It's a civil war situation with a tactic of terrorism involved.
Right. And we just look. We can't afford to get back into that. I mean, we broke it, and we made that mess. But anything that we do is just going to make it worse. And I was actually talking with Ron Placone earlier today. He's also part of the TYT Network. We did a show, we did Media Bites, and we talked about the same thing. And it kept going back into, you know, everything that's been laid out on the table is just going to make the problem worse. So what do? We have to stay out of it, or else we're going to make it even worse. All right. So I'm going to move on. Spent way too much time talking about this lady and talking about the whole issue of Iraq, and I want to get into something a little bit lighter and a little bit more fun. So, and I actually want to start out with an apology. Really. I'm sorry, Republicans. You were right. For so long, I believed that voter fraud wasn't an issue. But then something happened. Something happened that made me change my mind. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel recently reported that a man named Robert Monroe was looked into by authorities for illegally voting 5 times in Governor Scott Walker's recall election. Not only that, but he voted illegally in a 2011 Supreme Court election, a 2012 primary, and the 2012 presidential election. So obviously, he must have been a huge lib and even part of Acorn. I mean, we don't actually know who he voted for, right? Well, that's true. We do know who he donated to. And according to WISN, he donated to a state senator named Alberta Darling. But wait, Alberta Darling wasn't a liberal. She's a Republican. So most liberals don't give money to Republican causes. So from that, we can pretty much assume his political leanings. But wait, he has an excuse for why he did what he did. He forgot. According to Raw Story, Monroe insisted to investigators that he didn't remember voting because he takes drugs for ADD and OCD. For me, I'm not exactly buying it. Now, ADD is normally treated by Ritalin, a drug that's actually supposed to help a person learn and focus in the classroom. Now, it would be highly ineffective if it made you forget doing things. The same with Adderall, another common drug for ADHD. And also is in use by a lot of college students to stay up and to help remember and focus on your textbooks so that you can take tests in the morning. So look, I don't know what he took, but I'm not buying it that he just forgot that he allegedly voted 5 times for Scott Walker. Especially since he had texted his family, quote, "You must go to City Hall and register to vote. Every vote will be needed. Every vote matters." For something that important, it doesn't really make sense that he'd forget it so easily. So this is why I agree with Republicans. Voter fraud is happening. So maybe we should take an idea from the Republicans and begin to check the IDs of white Republicans wearing expensive suits. If you do that, you might just get rid of a majority of all voter fraud. What do you think of my idea, Sean? Anybody in a suit? Voter ID.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I know you're tongue-in-cheek in your suggestion, but I don't want to be a hypocrite and say I'm in favor of voter ID based on what you're wearing. But this guy's an idiot. Like, who? First of all, Scott Walker destroyed his opponent in that recall election. Like, it wasn't even. I'm pretty sure it wasn't even close. Secondly, it wasn't 4 votes. The difference. Like, he didn't need to vote 5 times. Thirdly, he got caught for a crime that, like, he literally, I'm pretty sure he literally committed half the voter fraud in this decade in one day. Like, in-person voter fraud is so rare. We get, like, 1 case a year, so that would be, like, 10. And he voted 5 times. He's only supposed to vote once. So he committed 40% of the voter fraud we'll see in this decade.
I know, right?
Isn't that kind of amazing?
That is pretty amazing. But this guy, it's so funny how Republicans love to howl about, oh my God, there's massive levels of voter fraud. We've got so much voter fraud going on. We have to institute voter ID. We have to do all this stuff to protect the integrity of voting. And it seems like all the recent cases of voter fraud are perpetrated by Republicans. It's hilarious.
Do you recall that one woman who tried to vote twice to prove that you need voter ID, and she got caught, and they're like, you've already voted, can you leave? And she's like, I'm not going to leave, I'm going to vote again. They're like, no, you've already voted, just leave, you're busted. Right? And she kept trying until they arrested her. Like this guy, was he trying to prove a political point? Like, I don't understand. He voted 5 times under his own name. It's a pointless crime. Like, I can't express that enough.
He also tried to impersonate his son as well. So he also got hit on voter impersonation. Because he had filled out a ballot, tried to send in an absentee ballot with his son's name on it. This guy's an idiot. A massive idiot.
I mean, and apparently...
No, he wasn't trying to do it. To answer your question, he was not trying to make a point about, oh, this is why we need voter ID. This is why we need to protect our voting system. No, this guy is just a moron.
But that's the thing. He wanted to like the blogger that I was talking about wanted to make a point, right? And she was an idiot. Like, this guy is actually committing in-person voter fraud. When, like, Walker's a voter ID guy, like, it literally makes no sense. Like, he won easily, and your one absentee ballot, which, by the way, the Republicans want to get rid of, not going to make a difference. Like, it's like a 5-year sentence for in-person voter fraud, and you don't impact the election when you do that.
Well, that's why it's both stupid and hypocritical. In order, once again, the party that he belongs to is stupid and hypocritical when it comes to, voting in general. I mean, look, voter fraud isn't about, the voter ID isn't about trying to protect the integrity of voting. It's about trying to stop Democrats from voting. That's essentially all it is.
And the crazy thing is he's not even smart. If he wanted to help Walker, instead of voting for his son, he should have done that thing where you donate money in the name of your kid. You know how that guy got busted for that, where he tried to do it through his wife? Like, that's the way you help a candidate. You give the maximum, and you convince your family members to do so, and you pay them back on the DL. Like, that's how you commit campaign finance fraud. Like, what are you doing with voter fraud?
Like, you don't even have to commit campaign finance fraud. Our campaign finance system is so riddled with holes that you can literally, you can give money anonymously as much as you want.
Well, you have to give it to
United and McCutcheon.
I mean, you have to give it to a 501c4 or something like that. Like, you would, and this was in the past. So he would, but I'm saying to give money directly to Walker to help him, because you don't know how effective those other things are going to be or whatever. Like, you do that scam. Like, what do you do? Like, this is the funny thing about this guy, is that three things must be true about him. One, he must believe in that every vote counts thing to a fault. 2, he must not believe that one person, one vote is a big thing. So he doesn't believe in America, even though he believes that one vote can change everything, or 4 or 5. And 3, he has to be a total fucking moron.
I'm going to go with 3.
No, I'm saying all 3 of those things have to be true. Like, you have to believe all those things to do in-person voter fraud.
But Sean, he forgot. He was taking medication.
Well, I mean, he took medication with the absentee ballot too, and all these other ones. Ridiculous. I don't.
Moron.
What's funny is because Walker's governor. I don't know if this was a federal indictment or if, since Walker's governor, the state attorney general has to investigate him, so Walker has to put him in jail.
Win.
Extra funny. Extra ironic.
All right. Well, okay, so we go on from stupid Republican to the World Cup, or at least something related to the World Cup. Trust me, you guys will actually enjoy this. This will be a lot of fun. Now, Fox News was talking about the World Cup on their show Outnumbered, and they were having a pretty light conversation. But one of their guests was a Dr. Keith Abloh, supposed doctor that always has to psychoanalyze somebody, normally President Obama, and would come up with crazy explanations of why Obama does things or acts a certain way or whatever. And he was no less crazy on the subject of the World Cup. Check it out.
This routine. Let's roll out the marijuana, pull back the laws, and get people even more crazy about yet another entertainment event. I think this is
what's wrong with
a
that?
way to distract people.
You
This
have
is
a very
like this is
dark
like Rome.
worldview, right?
This is like Rome. I can see why Obama would love.
What are you
the World
talking
Cup
about? This is
because it's
encouraging
like,
for kids to get out and
Yeah.
play sports, and you
It's
can play
overblown.
soccer from a young age.
Go
Like, that's
play
what's so
if
good
you
about
want.
it.
I think that's fine, but I think it's interesting that at a time when there's so much to pay attention to, of such great import, we're playing games.
Paris, how about you? Are you
more
into
than
the World
ever.
Cup?
Well, gosh, I have
I
to disagree
care.
with the
Life is
doctor.
It's a little
hard.
much.
They set these schedules years ago. It's not like they lined it up with what's going on in the current events of the world. So no way is that
It's
the
a
case.
social cultural phenomenon.
But yeah, you know, I think it's like the Olympics right now. I'm excited.
I think it's good. I think Dr. Keith needs to take a chill
Dr.
pill.
Keith, now I know why you guys make so much money. I need to talk to a therapist after this hour.
Well, to be fair, you would have to talk to a therapist just to be on Fox News. This was hilarious. It's just amazing how everything can be turned into a form of Obama derangement syndrome. What do you think about this, Sean?
Well, Dr. Keith Abloh is a special kind of crazy. One of my favorite interviews, and this is a YouTube clip, is of Dr. Keith Abloh on like the Fox Business Network, talking about how they should put labels on Facebook or computers to stop kids from being, like warning labels like cigarettes, to stop kids from being induced by Slenderman into murder. Like, I'm not sure how exactly that would work, but he's in favor of Surgeon General labels on the computer or on the Facebook, as he calls it. So this guy's a nutbag. And by the way, you should watch that clip because they rip him apart on Fox, which he doesn't expect, and it's hilarious. But in this case, I hate soccer, and I kind of like that there's negative talk about soccer somewhere on TV, but this isn't even about like how much soccer sucks and how it shouldn't be on TV. It's about somehow Obama staged the World Cup, went back in time, created FIFA just so it could protect them from these scandals.
Well, you know, FIFA is an evil organization, so I mean, it totally fits with Obama's MO, right?
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, it's un-American, which soccer is, and if you're watching it in America, you're a bad person. It's what you call it. It chose a Middle Eastern country for a future World Cup called Qatar. Obviously, terrorist ties there. The other World Cup is in Russia. Come on, people! Like, what are we doing? Obviously, evil. And Obama has been working with them on the DL. In fact, I'm pretty sure that FIFA created Obamacare.
Of course, because it's that evil of an organization. But seriously, even the ladies that were there were like, "Are you fucking serious, dude? Seriously?"
Which, by the way, why is Keith Abloh such a bitter man? He's surrounded by 4 attractive women with very nice legs, and he's still a bitter old piece of crap. Like, I don't understand. Like, just chill out, bro.
Yeah, it's like, well, everything has to come down to, like, politicizing everything. I mean, and trying to blame Obama for it. Like, this is a distraction for Benghazi, Fast and Furious, and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's the World Cup, dude. Calm the fuck down. Actually, like, try to sound normal for once.
And if Dr. Keith Abloh, who I actually hate calling a doctor because it seems like this guy should not have any license or anything.
Okay, I got a fix for that, Sean. Every time you say doctor, put it in quotes.
Right. Well, if Abloh really wants to talk about the World Cup being a distraction, it is a distraction from problems in Brazil. Like, the Brazilian protesters and all this, like, those people have a legitimate gripe because they're using their resources that should be going to, their people to host this gigantic event, and they're building massive stadiums that after the World Cup will be gone. Like, nobody's going to go to that fucking Rainforest Stadium. Like, it's ridiculous. So, like, that's a legitimate gripe for Brazilians to have. Like, we're watching a spectator nation. I mean, I know America's still in it, but we're a spectator nation. This actually literally doesn't affect us at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but see, that's an actual real problem and real concern, and doesn't fit into the narrow version of reality that is constructed around Dr. Keith Abloh.
Well, you know what we should do? We should put Surgeon General labels on soccer balls and that say, "Warning, may distract you from Benghazi."
There you go. I think I can get behind that.
Nailed it. By the way, funny random story. Some guy came up to me on the train the other day, and he asked me to donate $10 for his youth basketball association. Looked like an obvious scam to me, but I gave the guy $10. Some guy selling chocolates with like 3 kids 3 days later asked me to help his kids get to the soccer finals, buy new uniforms. I told that guy to fuck off. He was un-American.
Did a Loch Ness Monster ask you for tree fitty?
Tree fitty?
Tree fitty.
That was after that.
I told that Loch Ness Monster, I said, "What do you want, monster?" It says, "I need about a tree fitty."
I didn't tell any kids to fuck off for our child audience out there. Sorry.
All right. So, anyway, getting on to something serious. I'm actually going to throw it over to Sean. He's going to present the last story for the night, and he's going to talk about someone near and dear to his heart. Sean?
Let's not go that far. But Kentucky Senator Rand Paul has been making a concerted effort on behalf of Republicans and really on behalf of himself to reach out to black voters and disenfranchised voters. And recently he proposed a bill, which we're going to talk about in this story, which would allow convicted felons to have their voting rights restored once they finished their time and probation, which is kind of a weird step considering Republicans nationally and locally have been trying to restrict voting rights of certain undesirable groups. So I wanted to bring this up and talk about it with Jeffrey and ask him what he thinks about restoring convicted felons' voting rights.
It would have to depend on what they were convicted of and if they had served their time. I think that, I'm somebody who's very critical of the war on drugs, for example, right? I don't think that anyone who has had a drug offense, a drug conviction, basically because it's a victimless crime, when you're, smoking something on your own and you get arrested for it, I don't think that you should have your right to vote taken away from you. And look, I'll even be like the super most fair person in the world and say that for non-violent drug offenders, they shouldn't even have their weapons confiscated. I know that's one of the most unliberal, unprogressive things that I probably will ever be on record for saying. But I don't think that you should lose certain rights if you have, served your time on a non-violent drug offense. So I think it's perfectly fair to give those people back their right to vote.
Well, I agree with you on one thing about, I'll just touch on the gun thing right quick, is that non-violent felons who get their gun rights taken away, I don't think that makes sense. But I do think it would make sense, and this doesn't happen, for violent misdemeanors to lose their guns. Like, if you have some, like, horrible violent misdemeanor, like assault with a weapon, there's no reason that you should have your gun rights more than a felon who smoked a joint or had a pound of marijuana, whatever the felony drug equivalent is. But I actually disagree with this bill because I don't think it goes far enough. In the Rand Paul bill, it is closer to what you say, where non-violent drug offenders, non-violent felons, and it's almost 1 million people that would be included that would get their voting rights back, which is a great thing, would have their rights restored. But in my personal opinion, once you've got out of jail and you finish your parole or probation, like, you've paid your debt, quote unquote, to society, and you should have your voting rights restored. Like, I don't understand other than like, you know, rah, we're gonna be tough on crime. Like, those motherfuckers shouldn't vote. Other than that, like, justification, I don't see what the issue is with convicted felons voting. Like, they're not going to go out and vote in a substantive way that would, like, make murder legal all of a sudden.
Right.
Like, that's not going to happen.
Well, here's my here's my take on that. A little bit of an answer to your question is that the people who come up with these tough on crime laws are often more conservative. All right, let's be honest about this. Yes, I'm sure there are Democrats that are like, I'm tough on crime too because it's incredibly popular, right? Like, look at, for example, in your own home state of New York, that, you know, Giuliani, very, very popular there because he, quote unquote, cleaned up the city, essentially. Like, he was tough on crime. Now, of course, he was tough on crime in some of the wrong ways, and Bloomberg continued that, you know, fine tradition of being basically terrible to people and very, very harsh when it comes to sentencing and all that stuff and stop and frisk and whatnot. But a lot of these people that come up with these laws are right-wing, are very conservative, tough on crime. And I think part of that is because they don't want people to vote. And that's why they would restrict voting rights for people who are, you know, convicted of non-violent offenses and victimless crimes. So, you know, you remove people from that voting pool, you're more likely to get to win elections if you're a right winger. Remember, they don't want, remember the Goo syndrome, right? They don't want you to vote because the more people that vote, the less chance that they have of winning, and I think this is part of that.
Right. Like, I understand all that politically, right? But like, what the reason I brought up Rand Paul reaching out to minority groups is that stuff like this, and like the general outreach is fine. A lot of politicians do outreach to minority groups, and they don't really mean anything by it. But stuff like this, substantive bills like this could restore, like I said, 1 million people's voting rights. I think it should go further, but whatever. It's like the most non-controversial restoring felons' voting rights bill that you could possibly have. Like, this could restore 1 million people's voters' rights, and it is reflected in Rand Paul specifically in his poll numbers. In a recent poll done by in the state of Kentucky, which is his home state, pitted him against Hillary Clinton for the presidency. And Mitt Romney nationally last go-around won about 3% of the black vote, which is a fucking disaster. That's within the margin of error, which is amazing. So he won like 3% of the black vote. Rand Paul polls at 29% among black people in his home state, which is higher than when he won his election for senator. So if you like reach out and tell people, like, the lesson that should be learned from this, other than the fact that me and Jeff for the most part think it's good policy, is that if you reach out and do substantive things to help minority groups, or like, obviously there are white felons and all that, but like, black people are unfairly targeted by the drug war. But if you reach out in substantive ways to help people, like, that's how you get their votes. These people aren't like mindless, like zombies, like Herman Cain. They're not on a plantation and all that. It's just that the Republicans have been spitting on them for decades, and that's why they vote Democratic. And I hope the Republicans learn the right lesson from this, which they won't.
And also remember, it is Kentucky. So, I mean, there are a lot of conservatives there in Kentucky, and even, like, so one of the things that tends to be forgotten is there is actual black conservatives, which, like, to a lot of people, it makes their head explode. Like, why would you do that? Well, when you look at where the party stands on a lot of issues, that makes a lot of sense. Who would vote? Like, as a minority, who would vote for the Republican Party, right? And so I think Rand Paul is attempting to distance himself from that so he can glean those black conservatives. Because, well, I mean,
it's not even,
there are successful black business owners and guys who don't want to pay taxes and think that the government is too big. That exists within any race. Right? So if Rand Paul's reaching out there and saying, hey, don't worry, I'm not going to actually kick you in the balls or spit on you or call you a moocher or call you lazy, I'm going to appeal to what you want, which is lowering taxes, lowering all of our taxes, because, hell, I love lowering everybody's taxes. I hate taxes. I hate the IRS. You know, all the stuff that Rand Paul stands for. yeah, without all the racial demagoguing, you are going to start getting votes, and that's what the mainstream Republican Party doesn't understand. They think that they're trying to ride that Southern strategy train, the white racist old person, vote. They're trying to squeeze every little bit out of it because they don't know how to appeal to minorities. And Rand Paul might actually be a little bit different, and to their credit, maybe even Jeb Bush. But that doesn't mean that, and I'm saying that to be in all fairness, even when I disagree with about 70% of what Rand Paul his policies are, and about 99% of what Jeb Bush's policies are. So, but I am being incredibly fair. I am the most fair man in America.
But the thing I wanted to point out is that of course there are black conservatives, and of course it's Kentucky, but the 29% that he got is nearly double the black vote that he actually got when he ran for Senate in the general election. Like, it makes a difference to say, look, I don't hate you, and I want to work on issues that align with my principles, expanding the franchise, expanding the right to vote, and would specifically help would help people because they're affected disproportionately by our current system. Like, it's amazing how, and we could go over it. It's like sentencing reform, like all these things that he's doing that no other Republican will do because they don't care. Like, it's amazing how just that, little bit of effort can undo decades of hatred, at least for one person. Like the Southern strategy is horrible, and it's a stain on the Republicans, and you can undo that as a person working towards a goal. It's crazy that the National Republican Party is like, black people don't vote for us, therefore we should make it harder for them to vote, instead of saying, why don't they vote for us?
They don't vote for Republicans because Republicans, for one, they do nothing for them, and for two, they make them out to be what's destroying America.
Right, and by the way, Barack Obama got 97% of the black vote, which is ungodly high, right? Black people in general, and you could poll them. He got that high of a vote when he came out for same-sex marriage that year. Black people in general are more anti-gay than the general population. Like, they were. I think even though the general population was in favor of same-sex marriage, they were still 60-40 against. So it's not saying that of course there are black people that have conservative views. It's just that you can't hate them and then expect them to vote for you. You can't actively use code words against them and then say, well, right, vote for me because we both don't like gay people. That's not going to work. You have to appeal to people.
Right, and that's something that if the Republican Party wants to survive into the future and actually start winning elections, they actually have to learn how to not hate people, and I just don't see it happening anytime soon. Maybe within the next, maybe after they get crushed the next two elections in the general, maybe they'll start to realize, maybe we're doing something wrong. And then, of course, by that time, a lot of the old people, the old white racists, will have died off by then. So we'll see a new Republican Party within the next decade.
I'll tell you what the Republicans really need to do. They need to nominate this guy, and he needs to beat Hillary Clinton, because he will be better than her on foreign policy. Hillary Clinton is a massive war hawk. She's like John McCain level, almost. If they win with that brand of Republican, that would change the entire party. If they nominate him and lose, then they're going to double down and say, we should go back to the Cheney era. But, they need to nominate, and he's a savvy guy. He is a savvy politician. He has a good chance of being the nominee, to not get to 2016.
I'm gonna go against that, and I'm gonna say that no, he's first of all, he's not gonna get nominated, and he's not gonna be a good presidential candidate, and neither is Hillary. I don't, obviously I wouldn't vote for Rand Paul, but obviously I also wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton unless I really, really had no choice. I'm not all excited at all about the field for 2016. And I'm not excited because replacing, it doesn't matter who you put up as the president, really, at the end of the day, because we have a system that's controlled by money. And so really, who you put up there, it's not going to matter all that much. Yes, there's Supreme Court appointments. Yes, there are some important things. You know, yes, if you get a Republican House or a Republican Congress and a Republican president, we could pretty much kiss all of our progressive things goodbye. I understand that point, but we have the system where money rules everything.
But I'll push back a tiny bit on that, right? Because obviously money is huge in all that in politics. Nobody's disputing that. But like Rand Paul's his big issue, or his number one issue, like everything aside, if you break it all down, is executive power. If you take somebody, if you put in a candidate right now, after we've had the Republican George Bush, who's radically expanding executive power, Democrat Barack Obama, radically expanding executive power. If you put somebody in there, and this was the argument against McCain, if you remember, back in the day, if you put somebody in there who really doesn't believe in executive power, we could sort of reset back to normal of what our three branches of government are meant to be. It is important to a certain extent to put somebody that doesn't believe in overwhelming executive power.
Okay, well, I wouldn't put in anybody, though. I wouldn't put in Rand Paul, and I wouldn't put in Hillary Clinton. There's got to be better options, but we've gotten way off in a tangent. Somehow we ended up somewhere in 2016. So we should probably end the discussion and continue another time on this speculation and sort of wrap up the show.
Right.
All right. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll save it for a year and a half from now.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to get a lot of talk about 2016 as it ramps up. Somewhere like next year. Look, this is what we do on when the show's not going on. We've literally sat here after the show and have talked about 2016 for like an hour, at least. I remember it was like a couple of weeks ago we did that. A little known fact is that after the show, we still sit here and bullshit for like an hour and a half, literally. So, what was that, Sean?
Sure. It's already started about talking.
Yeah. So
Chris Matthews has already talked.
Chris Matthews is a disaster. Let me just say that. I'm not a fan of Chris Matthews. Not at all.
The point is for our audience, we actively try and avoid, except when it's the specific topic, devolving every conversation.
Right.
Like, watch Hardball if you want that.
Right. All right. So anyway, one more thing, Sean. What? You're breaking up bad. Technology, man.
The Matthews laugh. That was it.
Oh. All right. Anyway, that's all we have for TYT Community tonight, the News and Politics Hour. Thank you guys for joining us on the live stream. You guys are awesome, keeping up the conversation. Shout out to TYT Talk for bringing a bunch of people over. That's really awesome. We really appreciate all the viewers. If you guys watching want to be on the panel, please let me know. You can send me a message on my Facebook, facebook.com/TYTNation. Send me a tweet at Jeff's Politics, or you can email me at jeffw@tytnetwork.com if you're interested in being a part of the panel, maybe becoming a regular after some time. We're always looking for new people to be on the show. So, if that's what you're interested in, more power to you. We'd love to have you guys on the panel. Once again, thank you guys for watching.
There's a 6-hour vetting process.
Yeah. Ignore Sean. Sean never got vetted, by the way. Never got vetted. I don't know why.
I aced the 6-hour vetting process.
I don't know how this guy keeps up hearing on my show. I don't quite get it. Anyway, if you guys really enjoy the show, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. If you really love our show and want to continue supporting what we do, keep us independent, keep us going, because YouTube money is shit, go to our Patreon page and become a patron. I want to thank our current patrons that we have, all 6 of you. You guys are fantastic. So if you want to go there and become a donator, donate as little as $1, on a recurring monthly basis. That's awesome. If not, if you guys just love watching the show, just please subscribe. We would appreciate all the help we can get of sharing and liking our videos. But if you want to do that, patreon.com/TYTNation. And tune in tomorrow where I'm hosting, I'm guest hosting for Rhiannon Avenine as she's out saving for a new computer. The Social Justice Hour tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Make sure to join us here on TYT Nation for that. We've got we've got some great social justice stories we're going to cover. So you can watch me get outraged about how we treat normal people. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure to tune in for that. And so for Sean and Jeff and TYT Community, I bid you all a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Sean?
And tomorrow is... good night, everybody. Tomorrow's Funny Hat Friday, so everybody come prepared.
No, it's not Funny Hat Friday. He lies. He lies. Yes. Good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.